Welcome back, welcome back. Early this month, a 750 billion euro stabilisation fund was agreed between the EU and the IMF to prevent a Greek meltdown. And on Tuesday, Greece received the first slice of its rescue package, just in time to prevent it defaulting on its debt. But all that was not enough to avoid concerns that debt problems will undermine Europe's recovery. And market scepticism briefly pulled the euro down to its lowest level against the dollar since 2006. So, is the rescue package just a waste of money? Is the euro doomed? And who is taking the biggest risk in this bailout plan? Joining me now from Washington, D.C. is the IMF First Deputy Managing Director, John Lipsky. Welcome, John. Delighted to have you with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Well, beginning here, I mean, who is taking a risk with this plan, with this vast plan? Is there anybody taking a risk, or is everybody secure?
Well, I assume that there will be some risk in the sense that the European Union is going to be issuing special debt, using a special purpose vehicle to raise this funding, and it's going to be guaranteed by the participants in the euro. But I would say the greater risk would be to the European economy and the world economy and markets if they hadn't been willing to undertake very forthright and decisive action. And that's what's occurred.
And in terms of when the IMF is called upon to make its contribution and so on, someone was raising the problem today, whose money is that? Is it actually yours at the IMF, or is it actually really belong to some country around the world? Where does, they say, 250 billion IMF money come from? Whose is it?
Yes, the IMF's funding comes from its 186 member countries, but those funds represent a kind of revolving fund or pool that is made available to individual members on a temporary basis and to be paid back. The IMF's always been paid back.
Always been very wise policy, I would think that. You actually said on one occasion, John, recently, that the 250 billion euro figure is, quote, a hypothetical or theoretical number. For people who found it so reassuring, the figure 250 billion, is it really only hypothetical, theoretical, or is that just, does that mean flexible?
It's flexible in the following sense. The European members have constituted really two facilities, a 60 billion euro balance of payments facility and a 440 billion euro stabilization mechanism, 500 billion in total. The co-funding in recent programs, such as in Greece, has been about 1 to 2. So if the 500 billion of the European Union is used in individual cases, the IMF could participate in more or less up to 250 billion. The detail is that the IMF funding will be in conjunction with programs on individual countries upon their request and qualification. So the actual amount will depend on the actual request for usage.
But I mean, in this situation, is there enough there? Is the bailout plan big enough to create a situation that would restore confidence, for instance, in the Greek economy? Or is that years away?
Oh, I like the term rescue package or support package rather than bailout plan. But the important point is the following. No amount of external funding is going to solve underlying problems. The bedrock of the program is really the willingness of individual countries to address the underlying problems. In the Greek example, the Greek authorities have committed to a very ambitious and difficult program of structural adjustment, of budget adjustment, and economic improvement. That is the bedrock, and that is the basis on which the support package will be useful.
And we read here that a joint mission from the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the IMF will visit Athens in June. How much progress would you expect to see by June? In one sense, people might think you're going to see a lot. On the other hand, is it just too short to see any progress?
Oh, no, you will see progress. The IMF program with Greece involves specific performance criteria, objective measures of progress on a quarterly basis. Every quarter, a team will be visiting Athens to make sure that the progress is as anticipated, and that triggers the release of new funding. But you will see progress, but what's clear is the problems are really substantial. The adjustment program is very ambitious, and the funding is enough to buy the Greek authorities a reasonable amount of time until they have to readdress financial markets. Under the program, the Greek authorities do not have to return to financial markets, private markets, until 2012. So that gives them ample time to demonstrate their ability to master the situation, make real progress, and institute some important improvements in the performance of both the public sector and the Greek economy in general. And that's what will build confidence.
Thank you very much, John.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you.
We're staying with world affairs now because John Simpson is the BBC's world affairs editor. In his 40 years at the corporation, he's reported from more than 120 countries, including 30 war zones, and somehow also had time to write a number of books, 7, 8, 9, they're piling out there. And his latest is called Unreliable Sources, How the 20th Century Was Reported. And he's going to be talking about it at Hay and Wye at the book festival too there on the 6th of June. But he's with me now for a special preview. John, welcome.
Thank you, David.
What inspired this book? Just you thought it was time to take a look at the media? Or?
I wanted to see, actually, really, I wanted to see how my job of reporting, daily reporting, had changed in 100 years. It was just a kind of question mark in my mind. Actually, I found it hadn't changed a bit. It was exactly the same sort of people approaching very much the same sort of problems in exactly the same ways. And the only way that was different, apart from television, of course, from 1900, 1899, 1900, was simply the way in which you got the material back to headquarters. And even that wasn't that different, because you still wrote it on a QWERTY typewriter, gave it to somebody or fed it into some machine, just as they did in 1900.
Oh, yes, I remember a friend of mine you may have met called Neil Shand was a reporter in Katanga or somewhere back in the 50s and early 60s, and he risked death and everything and went into the fighting was going on, and he came back with a report, and he really risked everything for this, and he got on the phone and he was dictating it through to the copy taker at the other end, and then after he was about halfway through this death-defying story when the copy taker said, "Is there much more of this, old boy?" It was so depressing for him.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
But so those are the only things. And do the technical things. You mentioned television there, single out television. Today I suppose you can single out the internet. Do these new techniques, in addition to spreading the news in a different way, do they alter the news as well?
I think all the speed makes it more difficult to get accurate reporting because there's so much of it, because outfits like Al Jazeera and the BBC are constantly determined to get the stuff on the air fast, and fast doesn't necessarily mean accurate, alas. But then, you know, I don't think that was very different in the Boer War, in the First World War and so on. These characters wanted to beat the opposition, and so maybe it took a bit longer to sort of get it all back, but it wasn't that different. I just think for better and for worse, and some of it is for worse, it is the same sort of job as it was a century ago.
As you look around the world today, at the unreliable sources and reliable sources, looking at the world today, who do you regard as the most dangerous man in the world today?
There are fewer of them, David. There are fewer of them. I mean, I suppose North Korea now, I mean, if the Kim Jong-il can shoot ships out of the water and sink them without any justification whatever, that makes him dangerous. I don't think personally, having met him and watched him in Iran, I don't think Ahmadinejad is dangerous. I think he's a bit of a, I'm trying to find a nice way, eccentric. But I don't think he's...
At the bottom of the screen, there's a translation of what he meant by eccentric. Yes.
But it's okay, you see, because after the last election last year, I was being banned from Iran. So I can just say what I think. Wait for another government to turn up there, I feel.
You'll be back.
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
What should the world do about Mugabe, do you think? I mean, do you think he's a danger, or only, I mean, he can bring suffering in a small area or a big area, but I mean, is it only local, his disgraceful conduct, or is it something that the world...
No, I think it's purely local, very, very depressing. I've spent a lot of time undercover there recently, yes, in the last 2 years. In fact, I wrote some of this book there. It was rather difficult because there wasn't any electricity, but we managed somehow. I mean, it's a wonderful country, a beautiful, charming country, lovely, educated people who've got a president who's running the place into the ground in the worst conceivable way. In that case, unless somebody is going to say, okay, well, let's invade, which I just think we've reached the end of the let's invade kind of process. At least I rather hope so, because I don't think it does anybody any good. I'm afraid I don't think that anything's going to happen to him in his own country, and I think he'll just die in office. But he's looking pretty fit and pretty effective when you see him. So maybe that'll still be some years off. It's a very depressing thing to say, but I don't think there's anything we either can or should do about it.
Well, it's a joy to have you with us, as ever. Come back again and see us soon, and thanks for everything.
Thank you, David.
John Simpson, the one and only. That's all we have time for, I'm afraid, this week, so join me again in 7 days' time for another Frost Over the World. Until then, goodbye for now.